Digital's the way to go.
Is this for the blog?
Yeah.
I saw it.
Okay, you did?
Very cool.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. So yeah, I think we can get started. You don't need to press record or anything.
Okay. No, it's recording, so we're good to go.
Okay, great.
Live action.
Well, we want to give a warm welcome to James Crawford. He's here for our social entrepreneurship panel. I know I'm really excited to hear from you and about the work that you're doing. And as I was looking into your background, so it sounds like you started a company called Venture Leather that is selling leather goods made in Uganda in the US market and reinvesting 100% of the profits back into Uganda, right?
Correct, yeah.
Awesome. So I was looking into your background, and it seems like you have this long history of social impact. It's kind of a fascinating background. Like, you did an internship with the Mogatoba project, and then it looks like you worked for Booz Allen as a consultant, and then were director of business for 31 Bits, and then boomeranged back to Booz Allen. So I'd love to hear the story behind that and kind of what the path was that guided you to start this company.
Yeah, so for me, I guess my journey really started in undergrad when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. You know, I initially went to college to play sports and make my parents happy, and then my sophomore year kind of figured out, okay, well, at some point you need to figure it out. And I've always been interested in history, politics a bit. So I picked up a book on Sudan, because this was 2006, the genocide was happening in Darfur, and okay, this is relevant, this is interesting. If this doesn't grab my attention, you know, what will? Because which was interesting that I picked up a book, is I didn't read a single book in high school. Because I just didn't care about anything we were learning in high school. So I ended up just tearing through that book, was just gripped by what was going on, and just said, okay, there's something here. And I just kind of kept reading more and more, and just kind of got that bug, and kept going after it, and sort of kind of migrating towards economic history and then business. Because if you read economic history, a lot of it is just industries, how they grow. And I just kind of contrasted that to a lot of what I was seeing in development, which is very much policy, aid, which is all good, but I felt like there was a big component of business missing there. And so coming to GPS, sorry if I say IRPS because I'm still have to switch that in my head a little bit. I felt like a bit of fish out of water, because I think development in and of itself is very academic driven, very policy driven. And I definitely wanted to go business route. I felt like that's better for me personally, but also what is that path? And so that's why, I kind of had some consulting jobs doing development, but then I ended up getting a private sector job just doing consulting, financial analysis, data analysis. And then went to Uganda, did that, but I wasn't too excited with the state of social entrepreneurship. I feel like it's more nonprofit, and let's try to add some business to it. And I felt like neither what was going on in the community and how the business was functioning was doing that well. And I kind of knew this going in. I either wanted to run the company within a year, or I was going to leave and probably have to start my own, and it was the latter. But then it was, okay, well, what is that business I'm going to start? So I went back to Booz Allen, and go back right before I left Uganda with 31 Bits, I started networking with people in the leather industry, because I felt, the big thing with me, social entrepreneurship, is poverty, creating jobs, especially with Africa, growing industry. I mean, without creating manufacturing jobs, I don't know how we're really going to create enough jobs for people in Africa. I mean, there's some tech going on, there's, agribusiness, all this stuff, but nothing really soaks up labor like manufacturing. And so I felt like, what's labor intensive? What does Africa has a good chance about really being successful with? And that's why I zeroed on leather and met the partner I have now, who's a local Ugandan, but very raw state. It's not easy to do anything in Africa. And so that's why I came back, was working with him remotely, but got a job back at Booz Allen because I had to support myself and just save my vacation time. We'd go out until it came time to just cut ties and jump into it, 100%. So I quit my job at Booz Allen about 5-6 months ago and haven't looked back.
So I think that's actually one of the hardest decisions for any entrepreneur to make, is when do you leave the well-paying job, which is probably, you know, doing a lot for you, and go after this full-time. Like, what was the tipping point for you?
So it's interesting. I thought I would struggle with quitting my job a lot more than I have, because I think I had to quit my job. You know, just knowing myself, and I think a lot about being an entrepreneur is like you have to know yourself. Because I knew I was going to be miserable, not just staying in a 9-to-5 cubicle job. I mean, that's not what drove me crazy. It's the thought of having this idea that I think can really work and not pursuing it. Like, that would just drive me crazy, and I know I would just be regretful if I didn't go for it. And so, knowing that about myself, I knew I had to go for it. And so to answer the question, it was just when it was right for the business. I was ready to quit my job at least 6 months before I actually did, but it wasn't the right time given where my partner was at and things that were set up in East Africa. So, but when that time came, I was definitely ready.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Take the plunge.
Yeah.
So you founded it in April of last year, right?
Yeah, so that's when I started kind of creating content for it, because I knew that jumping off point was coming. And so I tried to gear up for it. And so I took a trip in March for 2 weeks. We were actually working in Mombasa, Kenya. You know, the Kenyan election, things kind of went to crap, and so we had to shift everything back to Uganda, where my partner's much more set up, politically is a lot more stable, and it's been much better for us. But so I went 2 weeks in March, and that's when I got the idea of, okay, if I do, because part of doing a social enterprise, you want to connect with people, because not everyone's going to go out to Africa, or, you know, is going to devote their career to a cause. And so I think, to me, social enterprise isn't necessarily you pursuing that cause, but you connecting other people to it. And so that's why I had the idea of doing a video blog. And so based on that trip in March, I started releasing video content and putting out material, knowing that, you know, I was going to jump into it, you know, 100%. So, so that's when, I guess, Venture Leather Company actually started pushing that name out.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until, I think, September when I quit my job and went forward, and then this last December was the first time I sold anything.
Nice. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Were you up in time for the holiday season? And
yeah, so I thought things were going well, and so I committed to a couple of Christmas markets, not knowing exactly if I would be able to have product for it. But, you know, was able to rush back, and I missed the Thanksgiving, you know, Black Friday, all that, but was able to come back for the first 2 weeks of December. And do a bit of sales, test the market a bit. And so, yeah, I was pretty pleased with how it went.
That's awesome.
So, it's definitely stressful, but
so,
it's part of it.
Yeah, I think the video blog approach is a really smart one, and also kind of an interesting way to go about it. How did you land on that as your initial marketing strategy?
So I think part of it kind of goes back to some of the problems I have with most social enterprises. Everything is about pushing out a message that we're awesome, we're changing lives, we're incredible. When, okay, they're incredible people trying to do great things, but we all know, like, real change is hard. And most people who run social enterprises, I feel like they're better at telling a story and are really passionate about it, but there isn't a whole lot of depth there. And so everything I see as far as content being pushed out is a very controlled narrative about how great the organization is. And I feel like it's a bit self-serving, but it's also, it's kind of distorting the reality. Because stories are important and they're useful, but they're also a bit deceptive. Because you're not going to hear just a normal story, you're going to hear the best case story. And so, you know, when I was working for the company in Uganda, we would hear back from our headquarters, which is Costa Mesa in Orange County, like, hey, let us know some great stories about the ladies. And so, you know, we'd give them a couple stories, and then, you know, 6 months later, they're still telling the same stories, even though the stories aren't necessarily true, and it's definitely not representative of, you know, everyone. And it's not, they're not trying to be deceitful or, you know, but it's just, that's just how the dynamic is. And so I felt like with a video blog is a very, you're not trying to control the story, you're just trying to document it. And just, this is what's happening. And so it's definitely not something that's going to necessarily grip you emotionally right away, but I think over time, I hope that it helps show the relationships and kind of you see the building blocks coming together, and I hope, you know, kind of builds trust, you know, with me and how, you know, I interact with the people there, and I, you know, can explain more kind of the larger, bigger picture ideas, why we do certain things, why we don't do other things, and rather than just always pushing this narrative that we're incredible,
Yeah.
we're changing the world. Because, you know, if you've been around these organizations, you know, been in Africa, it just kind of seems the same. And so that was kind of like, so I knew some form of content, video came in play, but have anyone heard of Gary Vaynerchuk? Anyone know? Yeah, so I kind of came across a couple of his videos, and he's all about just document everything, just push out as much content as you can, just share your truth with the world. And so basically share your struggles, share your success, like just share it all, because it's not believable, you know, otherwise. And I feel like that's exactly how I felt about, you know, a lot of the work being done in Africa. I just didn't believe it, just because I know there's more to the story. And so I knew that resonated with me, and then in the same kind of video, he was talking about video blogging. I was like, what is this? Isn't that just for narcissists who just, you know, think they're God's gift to the world? But then I was just like, okay, like, I get this. And what's cool with video is that when you read something, you interpret it, the words, like in your own head. But I think what I want to have happen is that we need to have a better understanding of Africa. And so with video, you just consume it. Like, you get that so much more context than if you read, you put it in your own context. Whereas video, you just kind of consume and just watch. And so I felt that was an awesome format and platform to really kind of share the larger picture.
And would you say the video blog is kind of the main driver of people to your business right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, the way I feel like it pulls from like a lot of different people. I think YouTube is a very difficult platform to grow on because, I mean, who's searching for video blog in Uganda? You know, a startup business, and you know, not everyone's watching content on YouTube. So it's not as shareable as, you know, Facebook, Twitter, things like that. But it is interesting the way it pulls from like so many different you know, angles, and you are able to show a bit more depth to it. So I feel like it's definitely a long-term play, which, I mean, I want to do this for the rest of my life, and so that's why, you know, I've just stayed committed to it. I think I have 67 vlog episodes up right now.
Nice, wow.
And so it's one of those, I feel like, you know, at some point you always think it's going to get bigger than it is, but I still believe in it and the format and what it is. And I feel like no one else is doing it. And if you spent time abroad, and there's so many just crazy experiences that happen, and I'm sure if you've been abroad, people would say, like, what was it like? Like, you know, share it. And like, how do you even start, you know, explaining it? And so I feel like it's really cool with the video blog. I don't really have to explain it, just kind of like, yeah, this is what happened. And, you know, let people kind of interpret it themselves rather than me just kind of pushing toward them. So.
Thank you. That's such a great answer. So one of our questions, it might be a premature question, but it's, at what point did you realize this was actually going to work? Like, I know this is a very early stage company, and you want to get it for life, but yeah, like, where are you at right now? Yeah,
well, I mean, it's funny. I think if you don't think it's going to work, like, just don't go for it. Like, as an entrepreneur, like, if you have doubt, like, it's probably not a good idea to go for it.
Yeah.
So I think there's just like little moments where I just saw how what I'm trying to do is so different than other people, and just the perspective I'm trying to bring in. And, you know, my story is so much different. I feel like, I mean, the company I work for and all the other companies where it's, you go on a trip, oh my gosh, these people are so poor, I got to do something. Mm-hmm. And so you're just kind of jumping in, okay, well, what do you do? And we just pick up what worked for us in our context and just go, here you go, Africa, here you go, Uganda, you know, or wherever, you know, the areas you want to focus on. And that's where we go awry. And so you have the best people with all this passion, but have absolutely no direction to it. And so, you know, and so just kind of understanding where, for me, it's, okay, we haven't done a lot right. Let me try to understand and learn. And it's still a learning process. Like, I'm still learning a ton, but I think understanding that I have so much to learn, and it's not just let me go out and help them. It's let me just go work with them. I have something to offer, so do they.
Yeah.
And just trying to figure out where those pieces come together. And I mean, as we know, anytime we just go out and help people, like, no one really wants to just be helped. You know, they want to feel dignity, they want to feel valued, they want to feel like they contribute. And even though in the eyes of, you know, a lot of people out there who run these organizations, they think they're empowering and doing all this, but it's completely through their own eyes. And so, yeah, there's little moments, I mean, just with the product, kind of getting that together, because that's just a whole nother, I mean, there isn't really a product that is coming out of Africa right now that is competitive with, you know, is globally competitive. And so just seeing those pieces come into place to where we can really, you know, just show the world what can be done, you know, in Uganda, in Africa, because without demonstrating that you can manufacture quality products at a reasonable price, well, then those jobs are never going to, you know, manifest themselves. So,
yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of little moments where it's just like, yeah, just keep going.
Yeah.
And I think it's never, this is going to be a runaway success. It's just, there's so much there just to keep going that next step.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's all I really need.
And I really like what you said, like, don't start the business unless you believe in it. Like, that seems like a really important thing to have just going in.
Well, because if you have doubt, how are you going to convince other people who definitely have doubt,
Yeah.
you know, in you and your product and everything? And so, yeah, if there's, yeah, so I think kind of goes, I think what I said earlier, you have to know yourself for sure, in terms of, you know, what the business is, what it looks like, you know, all of that. So, yeah.
Thanks. So getting into kind of the nitty-gritty of your business and how it works, what have been some of the most important partnerships for you so far?
I mean, the biggest partnership is with my local partner in Uganda. So he's the biggest link to kind of everything. So just talk a little bit about the leather industry, like in Africa or East Africa. So there's cheap labor. There's not a whole lot else. So East Africa has a lot of livestock, cattle, sheep, and goat. So the issue is, okay, the initial stages, rearing livestock, labor intensive. Manufacturing leather goods, very labor intensive. That middle step, tanning, getting a hide into leather, finished leather, is very capital intensive. And so basically that middle step does not exist. And so to get leather in Africa, to source it locally, it's expensive and it's really hard to get good quality. What happens is, because they have such a trouble at that middle step, is that they semi-process the leather, and it's called wet blue, which is sort of like a commodity, and then they export it to Asia, where it gets finished into leather. And so, you know, kind of, you know, doing a, you know, specialization, what they should do, okay, export that leather, let it get finished where they have those tanneries, where they have capital, and allow the importation. Well, African countries do not let you import easily. And so, especially if you're a foreigner, that is just not going to happen. So the biggest challenge with people doing leather manufacturing in East Africa is that typically people selling in the States or Europe is that they're expats. You know, they're white, like me. And so for them to try to import leather, or even hardware, because the steel industry doesn't really exist in East Africa, so to get a quality zipper, like, you have to source it from outside. And so unless you have a local contact who also has connections with suppliers abroad, like, you're done. And so, you know, I've met with a couple other manufacturers before I met my partner, and they just said, we don't even try to import. Like, we tried it a little bit, we understand the process, and it's not even worth our time. And so the reason why I stuck with my partner is that he's born and raised in India, but he's He went to Uganda in 1996 to help Uganda get their leather industry going. So it was with the Indian company. So he's been in Uganda for almost 30 years now, married a Ugandan woman, so he's Ugandan citizen. He's been in the industry for 30 years, knows people, is very well respected, but also has contacts in India. So basically he's that missing link to where he can do everything I can't do and what my competitors can't do. So that's why that, you know, when you say like, when do I think it's going to work? Well, kind of having that piece in the puzzle that I needed to find. And so, I mean, there's so many else that has to come into place, but the key thing is there.
And how did you find each other?
So, kind of like friends of friends a little bit. So, one of the interesting things in Africa is that there's not many people out there, especially, you know, coming from the West. So it was really easy to network out there. And what I didn't share is I was actually trying to do stuff down in Mexico before I focused on Africa because it's closer. I'm conversational in Spanish, at least I was. But I didn't have the money to travel to Africa, so I said, well, and also, if I can't get something going in Mexico, why do I think I can get it going in Africa? That probably sounds like it'd be harder. But once I started, you know, had a mutual friend who's in Malawi doing stuff with coffee and coffee farmers, was like, I don't know business, can you help us out? I just started networking. It was just so much easier to build a network because everyone kind of knew each other. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of where that all kind of happened. And then, you know, then I realized, okay, so I just started networking. That's when I was like, okay, well, I'll take this job in Uganda because I feel like that's the next step. Then I was like, okay, this isn't working out. But then I started networking while I was out there. I was okay, leather, met with a couple manufacturers, like, who do you know? Because a couple people do leather things out there that I knew. And then the second time I heard of this guy, my partner now, I had a friend who went and visited him and just said, hey, you gotta check it out. Like, it's a very raw operation, but has tons of machines, like, you just gotta check it out. And so I did, and luckily, so it's a family operation, but the father was there, met with him for about an hour, and we just clicked right away. And you know, he's a dreamer, like, I have a vision of really doing something of substance out there, and so we just kind of clicked, and I understood, because you know, I tried to do as much homework as I could about the leather industry, and I knew he could get around things that I couldn't. And so I was like, okay, this is the guy.
That's really cool. It's a great story because I know a lot of people, like when you're trying to find a business partner, they'll LinkedIn stalk somebody and try to find, you know, the person who has the expertise in this niche and that connection, and it sounds like that just doesn't exist out there. It really is kind of word of mouth.
Yeah, it's all person to person. I mean, you definitely, I mean, email a ton, but it's just, who do you know? And so I think personal relationships are huge, but also having personal introductions to people, that's huge. So I think, but also I think, I mean, kind of, as an entrepreneur, like, if you're starting something, you need to know what you're looking for. Like, that's the biggest thing. Because I knew what I was looking for, which is why I knew he was the right guy. But if I would have met him a couple months ago, like, I don't know if I would have known he's the guy I need to work with. So I think that's, you know, doing your homework, kind of understanding what you're looking for and what you need to kind of get to that next step. Because I think it's easy sometimes to kind of think all this has to